0 to 1 Notes on Startups, or How to Build the Future by Peter Thiel with Blake Masters. Table of Contents. Preface. 0 to 1, The Central Thesis. Chapter 1, The Challenge of the Future. Chapter 2, Party Like It's 1999. The .com Lessons. Chapter 3, All Happy Companies Are Different. Monopoly versus Competition. Chapter 4, The Ideology of Competition. Chapter 5, Last Mover Advantage. Building Durable Monopolies. Chapter 6, You Are Not a Lottery Ticket. Definite versus Indefinite Futures. Chapter 7, Follow the Money. The Power Law. Chapter 8, Secrets. What Isn't Being Told. Chapter 9, Foundations. Getting the Start Right. Chapter 10, The Mechanics of Mafia. Building Culture. Chapter 11, If You Build It, Will They Come? The Importance of Sales. Chapter 12, Man and Machine, Humans and Computers as Complements. Chapter 13, Seeing Green. The Clean Tech Lesson. Chapter 14, The Founder's Paradox. Conclusion. Stagnation or Singularity. Master Framework. 7 questions every business must answer. Chapter Preface. 0 to 1, The Central Thesis. Peter Thiel opens with the defining distinction of the entire book. The difference between going from 0 to 1 versus going from 1 to n. This is not merely semantic, it is the philosophical core around which everything else orbits. The 0 to 1 distinction, going from 1 to n, means copying something that already works, taking the world from one to many. It is horizontal progress, adding more of the same. Going from 0 to 1 means creating something entirely new, vertical progress. The first typewriter going from 0 to 1, 100 typewriters going from 1 to n. A word processor going from 0 to 1 again. The difference matters enormously. Horizontal progress is easy to imagine because we have already seen it. Vertical progress requires doing something nobody else has ever done. It demands not just skill, but imagination, courage, and the willingness to hold contrarian beliefs. Core definition: technology is any new and better way of doing things. It is not limited to computers, it is the mechanism of 0 to 1 creation across all domains. Why startups? Thiel argues that new technology tends to come from new ventures, startups, rather than from large organizations. The reason is structural. Bureaucratic hierarchies move slowly, and entrenched interests shy away from risk. Large organizations reward sign-alling that work is being done over actually doing the work. At the opposite extreme, a lone genius can create art or literature, but cannot build an entire industry. Startups operate on the principle that you need to work with other people to get things done, but you also need to stay small enough so that you actually can. A startup is defined as the largest group of people you can convince of a plan to build a different future. The most important strength of a new company is new thinking. Even more important than nimbleness, small size affords space to think. This book, Thiel says, is an exercise in thinking, asking and answering questions that startups must confront when doing new things. Every moment in business happens only once. The next Bill Gates will not build an operating system. The next Larry Page or Sergey Brin won't make a search engine. And the next Mark Zuckerberg won't create a social network. If you are copying these guys, you aren't learning from them. Peter Thiel. Key ideas: right pointing arrow. Progress can be horizontal, 1 to n, copying what works, or vertical, 0 to 1, creating something new. Right pointing arrow technology, properly understood, is any new and better way of doing things, not just computers. Right pointing arrow startups exist because large organizations cannot think freshly. Lone individuals cannot build industries. Right pointing arrow: a startup is the largest group of people you can convince of a plan to build a different future. Right pointing arrow success in startups requires thinking from first principles, not following formulas. Chapter 1, The Challenge of the Future. Thiel opens every job interview with a disarmingly simple question. What important truth do very few people agree with you on? He uses this to identify contrarian thinkers, because genuine insight requires both intellectual clarity and psychological courage. It is easy to repeat what everyone already believes. It is hard to hold a well-founded position that almost nobody else holds. The contrarian question: most answers to this question are bad. Our educational system is broken. America is exceptional. There is no God. These are weak because many people already believe them, or they simply take one side in a familiar debate. A good answer takes the form: most people believe in X, but the truth is the opposite of X. Thiel's own answer to the contrarian question is this: most people think the future of the world will be defined by globalization, but the truth is that technology matters more. Without new technological change, spreading old ways to create wealth around the world will result in devastation, not riches. In a world of scarce resources, globalization without new technology is unsustainable. Two forms of progress: horizontal progress, 1 to n, vertical progress, 0 to 1, copying what already works, doing something entirely new, globalization, spreading what works, technology, creating what never existed, easy to imagine, we've seen it, hard to imagine, requires invention, China copying the developed world, Silicon Valley creating new paradigms, adding more of the same, creating more of the new technology versus globalization. Thiel distinguishes these two modes of progress sharply. From 1815 to 1914, the world saw both rapid technological development and rapid globalization simultaneously. Between the World Wars and 1971, there was rapid technological development but limited globalization. Since 1971, we have seen rapid globalization but limited technological development, mostly confined to information technology. The practical consequences are serious. If China doubles its energy production over the next 2 decades using today's technology, it will also double its air pollution. If every Indian household were to live as Americans currently do, the environmental cost would be catastrophic. Old methods of creating wealth, spread globally, do not scale to prosperity. Why technology requires startups? New technology does not appear automatically. History is not a conveyor belt of progress. After 10,000 years of fitful advance from primitive agriculture to medieval windmills, the modern world experienced relentless technological progress from the steam engine in the 1760s to roughly 1970. Then it slowed dramatically. Smartphones have distracted us from noticing that our physical surroundings, buildings, roads, energy infrastructure, are largely unchanged since mid-century. The challenge of our era is both to imagine and to create the new technologies that can make the 21st century more peaceful and prosperous than the 20th. That task falls primarily to startups, because the structural incentives of large organizations work against radical innovation. Thiel's contrarian answer: most people believe the future will be defined by globalization. Thiel believes technology matters more. Without new technology, global convergence produces resource conflict, not shared prosperity. Key ideas: right pointing arrow. The contrarian question: what truth do very few people agree with you on? Filters for genuine thinkers. Right pointing arrow. Progress is either horizontal, globalization, or vertical, technology. Technology is the more powerful force. Right pointing arrow. Globalization without new technology is unsustainable in a world of finite resources. Right pointing arrow. Technological progress is not automatic, it must be actively created. Right pointing arrow. Startups are the primary vehicle for 0 to 1 creation because of their structural freedom to think. Chapter 2. Party like it's 1999, learning from the dot-com crash. To think clearly about startups today, one must understand how the dot-com crash of 2000 warped the thinking of an entire generation of entrepreneurs and investors. The lessons that people drew from that crash were understandable, but largely wrong. The context of the 1990s. The popular memory of the 1990s is of prosperity and optimism. But the decade began with recession, unemployment, and anxiety about globalization. The East Asian financial crises of 1997 and the Russian ruble crisis of 1998 rattled global confidence. Long-term capital management, a hugely leveraged hedge fund, collapsed and required a Fed-orchestrated bailout. The euro launched to widespread skepticism. Against this backdrop, the internet represented the only viable path to a better future. By indirect proof, Silicon Valley's new economy was not mere speculation. It was genuinely the most credible engine of growth in a world where everything else seemed to be failing. The 18 months of mania, September 1998 to March 2000.com mania lasted only 18 months but was extraordinarily intense. Startups competed to throw the most lavish launch parties. Paper millionaires tried to pay restaurant bills with startup stock. Appending.com to a company name could double its valuation on overnight. Every week dozens of new companies competed for the same irrationally exuberant capital pool. PayPal itself operated in this environment. Thiel was not convinced the market was rational, but he was compelled to move quickly to raise capital before the crash he saw coming. On the 16th of February 2000, the Wall Street Journal published a story suggesting PayPal was worth $500 million. The company raised $100 million the following month, just before the bubble popped in March. Everybody should have known that the mania was unsustainable. The most successful companies seemed to embrace a sort of anti-business model where they lost money as they grew. Peter Thiel. The Nasdaq crash and its aftermath. The Nasdaq peaked at 5,048 in mid-March 2000 and collapsed to 1,114 by October 2002, a fall of nearly 80%. The era of cornucopian hope was declared over. Investors retreated from technology to housing and bricks. The crash was interpreted not merely as a market correction but as a divine judgment against technological optimism. The 4 lessons entrepreneurs drew, and why they were wrong. Surviving entrepreneurs drew 4 lessons that have dominated Silicon Valley thinking ever since. Thiel argues that each lesson, while understandable, leads in the wrong direction. Lesson drawn after crash: why Thiel thinks it's wrong. Make only incremental advances. Grand visions inflate bubbles. It is better to risk boldness than triviality. Stay lean and flexible. Planning is arrogant and inflexible. A bad plan is better than no plan at all. Improve on competition. Never try to create new markets prematurely. Competitive markets destroy profits for everyone. Focus on product, not sales. If it needs selling, it isn't good enough. Sales matters just as much as product. These counter lessons are not obvious. The dot-com crash was real, and the mania was genuinely excessive. But the correct response to a wave of irrational exuberance is not permanent timidity, it is careful, principled, bold thinking. The PayPal case study: PayPal's trajectory illustrates both the madness of 1999 and the possibility of surviving it with a genuine business plan. Thiel's decision to raise capital quickly, before the crash he anticipated, secured the company's future. The most contrarian act of all. Thiel's deeper point is epistemological. You cannot escape the madness of crowds by mechanically doing the opposite of what crowds do. That is just contrarianism for its own sake. The most contrarian thing of all is not to oppose the crowd but to think for yourself, independently, from first principles, asking whether conventional wisdom in your domain is the product of reasoned analysis or of traumatic overreaction. How much of what we believe about startups today is shaped by mistaken reactions to past mistakes? That is the question every entrepreneur must ask. Key ideas: right pointing arrow. The dot-com mania of 1998 to 2000 was partly rational. Global alternatives were failing and the internet was genuinely promising. Right pointing arrow. The 4 lessons drawn from the crash: incrementalism, leanness, competition improvement, product, over, sales, are understandable but largely wrong. Right pointing arrow. The correct contrarian answers: boldness beats triviality. Plans beat no plans. Competition kills profits. Sales matters as much as product. Right pointing arrow. The most contrarian act is not to oppose crowds, it is to think independently from first principles. Right pointing arrow. Ask yourself, how much of what you believe about business is a traumatic reaction to past mistakes? Chapter 3: All happy companies are different. Monopoly versus competition. The business version of the contrarian question is, what valuable company is nobody building? This question is harder than it looks, because creating a lot of value and capturing a lot of value are different things. Most entrepreneurs conflate them, and his conflation is ruinous. Capturing value versus creating value. The airline industry creates enormous value for passengers and the broader economy, hundreds of billions of dollars annually. Yet in 2012, the average airline made only 37 cents of profit per passenger. Google, by contrast, captured 21% of its $50 billion revenue as profit, more than 100 times the airline industry's margin. Google is now worth 3 times all US airlines combined. The difference is not the amount of value created but the competitive structure of each industry. Airlines compete fiercely with each other and drive profits to near zero. Google stands alone in its core market and keeps an extraordinary share of what it generates. Perfect competition versus monopoly economics. 101 presents 2 simplified models. In perfect competition, identical firms sell homogeneous products at market, determine prices. New entrants flood any profitable market and drive returns to zero. In the long run, no firm earns an economic professorate. Perfect competition is often described as the ideal market structure, efficient, fair, and self-correcting. The opposite is monopoly. A firm so good at what it does that no other firm can offer a close substitute. A monopolist sets its own price and earns persistent profits. To economists, all monopolies look the same, whether they got there by illegal bullying, government license, or genuine innovation. Thiel's focus is exclusively on the third type, innovation monopolies. Google is the paradigmatic example. It has not faced meaningful competition in search since the early 2000s. This is not the result of coercion, it is the result of being genuinely and dramatically better. Americans mythologize competition and credit it with saving us from socialist breadlines. Actually, capitalism and competition are opposites. Capitalism is premised on the accumulation of capital, but under perfect competition all profits get competed our way. Peter Thiel: The lies that both sides tell. Because monopoly is politically sensitive and competition is emotionally threatening, both monopolists and competitors lie about their market positions, in opposite directions. Monopoly lies. Monopolists downplay their dominance to avoid regulatory scrutiny. Google does not claim to be a monopoly. It frames itself as a small player in the broader advertising market, $495 billion globally, rather than the 68% owner of the US search market. By expanding the frame of reference, its dominance becomes invisible. Competitive lies. Monopolists exaggerate their uniqueness to appear investable. A startup wants to seem different even when it is not. We're the only British restaurant in Palo Alto, defines the market narrowly to manufacture apparent dominance. But is British food in Palo Alto a real market? Almost certainly not. The pattern: monopolists describe their market as the union of many large markets. Non-monopolists describe theirs as the intersection of several small ones. Why monopoly is good? In a dynamic world, in a static world, monopoly is rent extraction. A monopolist captures existing value and redistributes nothing. This is the basis of the traditional critique. But in a dynamic world, one where new things can be created, the picture changes entirely. Creative monopolists give customers more choices by adding entirely new categories of abundance. Apple's monopoly profits on the iPhone were the reward for creating something that genuinely did not exist before. Customers paid premium prices and were happy to do so because they were receiving real value. The dynamism of new monopolies also explains why old monopolies don't permanently strangle innovation. Apple's iOS undermined Microsoft's Windows dominance. Microsoft itself had undermined IBM's hardware monopoly. AT&T's telephone monopoly gave way to mobile competition. Each new monopoly displaces the previous one while creating net value. Progress is a history of better monopoly businesses replacing incumbents. The Tolstoy inversion. Tolstoy wrote that all happy families are alike and each unhappy family is unhappy in its own way. Business is the opposite. All happy companies are different, each earns a monopoly by solving a unique problem. All failed companies are the same, they fail to escape competition. Key ideas: right pointing arrow. Creating value and capturing value are different. A company can create enormous value while capturing almost none of it. Right pointing arrow. Perfect competition destroys profits. Monopoly, through genuine innovation, creates and preserves them. Right pointing arrow. Monopolists lie by expanding their market frame. Non-monopolists lie by narrowing it. Both distort reality. Right pointing arrow. In a static world, monopoly is extraction. In a dynamic world, creative monopolists add new abundance. Right pointing arrow. Every successful business is a monopoly. All failed businesses are the same, they failed to escape competition. Chapter 4: The ideology of competition. Competition is not just an economic phenomenon, it is an ideology. It pervades our educational system, our cultural values, and our personal ambitions. We preach competition, internalize its necessity, and enact its commandments. And as a result, the more we compete, the less we gain. Competition in education. The educational system is built around competition from the very start. Grades measure each student's competitiveness against peers. Students who do not excel on conventional measures, tests, assignments, sitting still at desks, are made to feel inferior. Those who do excel define their identities through an artificially constructed academic tournament. As students ascend to higher levels, the stakes rise and the competition intensifies. Elite students reach university confident and capable, then find themselves locked in fierce rivalries over conventional career paths, management consulting and investment banking. The reward for decades of high performance is a process-oriented career designed to signal competence rather than to create anything new. Thiel's personal experience. Thiel traces his own path through Stanford Law School, where he competed for the ultimate prize, a Supreme Court clerkship. He was invited to interview with Justices Kennedy and Scalia. He came close. He failed. At the time, he was devastated. Years later, after building and selling PayPal, he ran into a friend who had helped him prepare. His friend grinned and asked, "Aren't you glad you didn't get that clerkship?" With hindsight, Thiel saw that winning would have directed his life toward Tarkine G depositions and drafting deal documents, not creating anything new. The loss turned out to be a gift. The lesson is generalized. Competition distracts us from what actually matters by making us focus on winning tournaments rather than creating value. All Rhodes scholars had a great future in their past. Shakespeare versus Marx on competition. Why do people compete so intensely? Two contrasting frameworks explain human conflict. Marx's model, Shakespeare's model. People fight because they are different. People fight because they are the same. The proletariat fights the bourgeoisie over incompatible interests. The Montagues and Capulets fight despite being identical in dignity. Difference drives conflict. Sameness drives conflict. Greater difference equals greater conflict. The more they fight, the more similar they become. Thiel argues that Shakespeare provides the superior model for understanding business rivalry. Inside firms, people compete obsessively for the same responsibilities. Between firms, competitors focus on each other rather than on creating value. The Microsoft, Google war. Gates and Schmidt, the real world Romeo and Juliet. Microsoft built operating systems and office applications. Google wrote a search engine. There was no inherent reason for conflict. But as both companies grew, they began to focus on each other. The resultee was a cascade of competitive products. Windows versus Chrome OS, Bing versus Google Search, Explorer versus Chrome, Office versus Docs, Surface versus Nexus. While Microsoft and Google fought each other, Apple came along and overtook them both. By January 2013, Apple's market cap was $500 billion, while Microsoft and Google combined were worth $467 billion. 3 years earlier, each had been more valuable than Apple individually. War is costly business. Competition creates illusory markets. The online pet store wars of 1999-2000 illustrate how competitive obsession can cause entrepreneurs to hallucinate opportunity. Pets.com, Petstore.com, Petopia.com, and dozens of others raised hundreds of millions of dollars competing fiercely in what turned out not to be a viable market. Each company was so focused on defeating its rivals that no one asked whether the market was worth fighting for. After the crash, $300 million of investment capital disappeared with Pets.com. The right question, instead of asking, how do we beat competitor X? The startup founder should ask, is this a market worth creating, and can we create a durable monopoly within it? The difference between these questions is the difference between survival and extinction. When to fight, and how sometimes fighting is necessary. If you must fight, fight decisively and end it quickly. The PayPal/X.com example. Thiel and Elon Musk spent late 1999 in all-out war while their offices sat 4 blocks apart in Palo Alto. One PayPal engineer actually detonated a bomb. In early 2000, the two founders met on neutral ground and negotiated a 50-50 merger. As a unified team, they rode out the .com crash. The merger bought them survival, the war was buying them nothing. Key ideas. Right pointing arrow. Competition is an ideology, not just an economic fact. We have been trained to celebrate it even when it destroys value. Right pointing arrow. Our educational system rewards competitive performance over genuine creation. Right pointing arrow. Shakespeare explains business conflict better than Marx. We fight because we are similar, not because we are different. Right pointing arrow. Microsoft and Google's war handed Apple its dominance, a lesson in the cost of competitive obsession. Right pointing arrow. When competition is unavoidable, merge or fight decisively. Never remain in a prolonged, destructive rivalry. Chapter 5. Last mover advantage. Building durable monopolies. Escaping competition is necessary but not sufficient. A monopoly is a great business only if it can endure into the future. The value of any business is the sum of all the money it will make, and most of that money, for technology companies, lies years or even decades ahead. The primacy of future cash flows. Compare the New York Times and Twitter. Each employs a few thousand people, each delivers news to millions. When Twitter went public in 2013, it was valued at $24 billion, more than 12 times the Times' market cap, despite the Times being profitable and Twitter losing money. The explanation is simple. Investors expected Twitter to generate monopoly-level cash flows in the future, while the Times' monopoly position was clearly over. The present value of a business is the discounted sum of all future cash flows. Low-growth businesses concentrate most of their value in the near term. Technology companies are the opposite. Most of their value exists 10 to 15 years out. In March 2001, TL projected PayPal's future cash flows and found that 75% of the company's present value would come from profits generated in 2011 and beyond, after just 27 months of existence. The durability trap. Because growth is measurable and durability is not, entrepreneurs focus on the wrong metric. Weekly active users, monthly revenue targets, quarterly earnings, these are all easy to measure. But rapid short-term growth can mask structural fragility. Zynga grew explosively with Farmville and claimed a psychometric engine to predict hit games, but never solved the underlying problem of how to produce a consistent stream of popular entertainment for a fickle audience. Groupon posted stunning growth, but struggled to convert one-time promotions into repeat customer relationships. Both companies' growth curves concealed existential weaknesses. The 4 characteristics of durable monopolies. Every durable monopoly combines some version of the following 4 characteristics. None is sufficient alone. Most successful companies combine several. 1. Proprietary technology. Proprietary technology is the most substantive advantage. It makes your product difficult or impossible to replicate. The threshold for competitive advantage is an order of magnitude, 10x. Better performance in some important dimension. Anything less will be perceived as marginal improvement, hard to sell, easy to copy. The 10x rule can be met in different ways. Invent something where nothing existed before, theoretically infinite improvement. Radically improve an existing solution. PayPal made eBay payments 10x better by eliminating the 7 to 10 day check delay. Improve Tiru superior integrated design. Apple's iPad made tablets 10x more usable than anything that had existed before 2010. 2. Network effects. Network effects make a product more useful as more people use it. Facebook's value rises with every new member. This creates a self-reinforcing dynamic that is extraordinarily difficult for competitors to replicate. The paradox of network effects businesses: they must start with especially small markets. Facebook started with just Harvard students. The initial market must be small enough that early users find the product immediately valuable even before the network is large. MBA types tend to dismiss these markets as too small to matter, which is exactly why they rarely build network effects businesses. 3. Economies of scale. A monopoly business strengthens as it grows. Fixed costs, engineering, management, infrastructure, are spread over increasing quantities of sales. Software companies enjoy dramatic economies of scale because the marginal cost of producing an additional copy is essentially zero. This allows them to serve vastly more customers at negligible incremental cost. Service businesses are difficult to monopolize for precisely this reason. A yoga studio can hire more instructors and open more locations, but the economics never reach the point where a small core team delivers value to millions. 4. Branding. A company has a natural monopoly on its own brand. Apple's brand is the most powerful in technology, built on beautiful hardware, carefully controlled retail environments, omnipresent advertising, and the residual charisma of Steve Jobs. But branding cannot substitute for substance. Marissa Mayer's Yahoo invested heavily in brand refresh, new logo, acquisitions of trendy startups, media attention, while never answering the core question of what products Yahoo would actually create. Building a monopoly. Start small, scale deliberately. Every startup should begin by dominating a very small market. It is easier to dominate a small market than a large one. The perfect target market is a small group of particular people concentrated together and served by few or no competitors. A large market is almost always a bad initial target. Getting 1% of a $100 billion market sounds attractive but is in practice nearly impossible. Large markets invite competition, and competition eliminates profits. By the time you have 1%, you may be fighting dozens of well-funded rivals for margins close to zero. Scaling up. Amazon's method. Amazon demonstrates how to scale from niche to general dominance. Jeff Bezos's founding vision was to dominate all of online retail, but he deliberately started with books. Books were easy to catalog, easy to ship, and the most obscure titles, those least street profitable for physical stores, attracted the most enthusiastic customers. Amazon then expanded to CDs, videos, software, adjacent markets with similar logistics, before eventually becoming the world's general store. eBay followed the same pattern, beginning with intense interest groups, Beanie Baby collectors, before expanding to the broader marketplace. The most successful companies make this core progression, dominate a niche, then scale to adjacent markets, a party of their founding narrative. Don't disrupt, create. Silicon Valley has become obsessed with disruption. Originally a term of art describing how low-cost entrants could displace incumbents, it has become a self-congratulatory buzzword for anything claiming to be new. The problem with defining yourself as a disruptor is structural. It means seeing yourself through the eyes of the incumbents you're threatening. It means your identity is built on opposition rather than creation. Napster defined itself as a disruptor of the music industry. It made the cover of Time magazine. 18 months later it was in bankruptcy court. PayPal, by contrast, expanded the market for payments rather than attacking Visa directly. The overall dynamic was net positive, more business for everyone. Avoid the framing of disruption. Focus on the act of creation. The last mover, not the first mover advantage, is a tactic, not a strategy. Being first matters only if no one can later displace you. What actually matters is being the last mover, making the last great development in a specific market and enjoying decades of monopoly profits. The way to achieve this is to dominate a small niche and scale toward a long-term vision. In chess, as Grandmaster Capablanca said, you must study the endgame before everything else. Key ideas: right pointing arrow. Most of a technology company's value lies in future cash flows, not current profits. Right pointing arrow. The 4 characteristics of durable monopolies: proprietary technology, 10x better, network effects, economies of scale, and branding. Right pointing arrow. Every monopoly should start with a very small market it can dominate completely. Right pointing arrow. Scale from dominated niche to adjacent markets. Amazon's book, 2, Everything Trajectory is the model. Right pointing arrow. Being the last mover beats being the first. Dominate the endgame, not the opening. Chapter 6. You are not a lottery ticket. Definite versus indefinite futures. Is success a product of skill or luck? This question sounds philosophical but has immediate practical consequences for how entrepreneurs think, plan, and act. Thiel argues that the modern world has drifted dangerously toward a view of the future as fundamentally indeterminate, and that this drift has paralyzed the kind of bold, definite planning that actually drives progress. The luck debate. Malcolm Gladwell attributes success to lucky circumstances. Warren Buffett calls himself a member of the Lucky Sperm Club. Jeff Bezos credits incredible planetary alignment. These statements are perhaps strategically humble, but they have a real effect on how people think about the future. If success is mostly luck, why make detailed plans? If the future is random, why invest in designing it? Serial entrepreneurship complicates the luck narrative. Hundreds of people have started multiple multi-million-dollar businesses. Steve Jobs, Jack Dorsey, and Elon Musk built several multi-billion-dollar companies each. If success were primarily a matter of chance, serial entrepreneurs of this caliber would not exist. A framework for thinking about the future. Thiel proposes a 2x2 framework based on 2 dimensions: optimism, pessimism about whether the future will be better, and definiteness, indefiniteness about whether the future can be known and planned for. Pessimistic, optimistic, definite, pessimism, China. Copy the West quickly before catastrophe. Definite optimism, US 1950s to 70s. Bold plans, moonshots, infrastructure. Indefinite pessimism, Europe post-1970s. Slow drift with no plan, indefinite optimism, US since 1982. Expect a better future with no specific plan, indefinite pessimism, Europe. The indefinite pessimist looks out onto a bleak future but has no idea what to do about it. This describes Europe since the early 1970s. Undirected bureaucratic drift, no one in charge, a philosophy of kicking the can down the road. The ECB improvises rather than plans. European governments manage decline rather than design progress. Definite pessimism, China. The definite pessimist believes the future will be difficult but can be known, and therefore prepares for it. China is the world's most definitively pessimistic nation. Chinese leaders know the future will be hard. They plan accordingly, executing definite programs to copy and surpass the developed world before catastrophe arrives. Chinese savings rates are extraordinarily high. Every class plans for disaster. Definite optimism, US 1950s to 1970s. The definite optimist believes the future will be better if planned and worked for. This was the American philosophy from the 17th century through the 1960s. The Manhattan Project, the Interstate Highway System, the Apollo program, these were the products of definite optimists with specific plans and the courage to execute them. In the 1950s, even ordinary citizens proposed large-scale projects. John Reber, a schoolteacher, proposed building 2 dams in San Francisco Bay to create freshwater lakes, and the U.S. Congress held serious hearings on the plan. Indefinite optimism, US since 1982, the most dangerous quadrant. Expecting a better future but having no specific plan to achieve it. After the pessimism of the 1970s, the US shifted into indefinite optimism as finance eclipsed engineering as the path to success. Indefinite optimists Aaron GE already invented things rather than creating new ones. Bankers restructure capital, lawyers resolve disputes over existing assets. Private equity squeezes efficiency from existing businesses. None of these activities bring us from 0 to 1. The educational system reinforces this. Students build portfolios of diverse extracurricular activities to prepare for a completely unknowable future. They accumulate options rather than developing deep convictions. The result is people prepared for nothing in particular, well-rounded, in the worst sense. The indefinite world's dysfunction. Indefinite finance. Finance is the pure expression of indefinite thinking. Founders who sell companies hand money to banks, banks diversify into portfolios, institutions diversify into stocks. At no point does anyone decide what to do with the money in the real economy. Money becomes an end in itself rather than a means to building something specific. Diversification is a response to uncertainty, not a strategy for creating value. Indefinite politics. Politicians track public opinion in real time through polling and tailor their positions to match it. The government now primarily distributes insurance, Medicare, Social Security, transfer payments, rather than executing ambitious specific programs. Entitlement spending has eclipsed discretionary spending every year since 1975. To increase discretionary spending would require definite plans for specific problems, something the indefinite political culture cannot produce. Indefinite biology. Modern drug discovery is indefinite science. Pharmaceutical companies search through millions of molecular combinations hoping to stumble upon cures rather than building detailed theories of how the body works. Ehram's law, Moore's law backwards, shows the number of new drugs approved per $1 billion of R&D has halved every 9 years since 1950. Indefinite methods produce indefinite results. The return of design. What would it mean to prioritize design over chance? Steve Jobs offers the most powerful example. Every Apple product was the result of multi-year definite plans executed with uncompromising attention to detail. Jobs did not listen to focus groups or iterate his way to success. He envisioned a product, planned its development, and executed the plan: the iPod, the iPhone, the iPad, each transforming a category. The power of planning explains why private companies are difficult to value. Founders who have definite plans refuse offers that seem too low. Founders without plans sell readily. When Yahoo offered to buy Facebook for $1 billion in 2006, Zuckerberg walked into the board meeting and said, "This is just a formality. We're obviously not going to sell here." He had a definite vision. Yahoo didn't. A business with a good definite plan will always be underrated in a world where people assume the future is random. Key ideas. Right pointing arrow. The 4 attitudes toward the future: indefinite pessimism, definite optimism, indefinite optimism. Right pointing arrow. The US has been stuck in indefinite optimism since 1982, expecting a better future with no specific plan. Right pointing arrow. Indefinite optimism is structurally unsustainable. The future cannot get better if no one plans for it. Right pointing arrow. Finance, politics, and biology have all been infected by indefinite thinking. Right pointing arrow. The antidote is definite planning. Apple under Jobs demonstrates what this looks like in practice. Right pointing arrow. You are not a lottery ticket. You can have agency over your life and over a small but important part of the world. Chapter 7. Follow the money. The power law. The power law is not a statistical curiosity. It is the fundamental structure of the world in which startups operate. Small minorities achieve disproportionate results. A handful of companies generate most of the value in the economy. A handful of investments generate most of the returns in any venture fund. Understanding the power law changes every decision an entrepreneur makes. What is the power law? In 1906, economist Vilfredo Pareto noticed that 20% of the people owned 80% of the land in Italy, a pattern he found repeated everywhere in nature. The largest earthquakes dwarf all smaller ones combined. The biggest cities dwarf all towns. Monopoly businesses capture more value than millions of undifferentiated competitors. This is the power law. Exponential equations describing severely unequal distributions. It governs so much of our surroundings that we usually fail to see it. We design our lives and our investments as though the world were normally distributed, as though differences between outcomes were modest and manageable. They are not. The power law in venture capital funds exist to find and invest in the small number of companies that will achieve explosive growth. The conventional picture of venture investing is diversified portfolio management. Place many bets, expect most to fail, hope the winners compensate for the losers. But this picture is wrong. Venture returns do not follow a normal distribution. They follow a power law. A small handful of companies radically outperform all others. At Founders Fund, Facebook, the single best investment in their 2005 fund, returned more than all other investments combined. Palantir, the second best investment, is set to return more than the sum of every other investment besides Facebook. The biggest secret in venture capital: the best investment in a successful fund equals or outperforms the entire rest of the fund combined. This means every investment decision must be evaluated against a single question. Does this company have the potential to return the value of the entire fund? 2 rules for venture investors. The Power Law implies 2 counterintuitive rules for venture capital. Only invest in companies that have the potential to return the entire value of the fund. This is a severe filter. It eliminates the vast majority of possible investments, including many genuinely successful businesses that succeed at a modest scale. Because Rule 1 is so restrictive, there can be no other rules. Focus and conviction must dominate over diversification and caution. The Andreessen Horowitz Instagram investment illustrates this. A $250,000 investment returned $78 million, 312x, when Facebook bought Instagram for $1 billion. A phenomenal return, but irrelevant to a $1.5 billion fund. To break even, they would have needed to find 19 Instagrams from $250,000 checks. The Power Law demands not clever bets but overwhelmingly large bets on the companies most likely to dominate. Why people miss the Power Law? VCs fail to internalize the Power Law because it only becomes visible over time. In the early stages of a fund, all portfolio companies look roughly similar. Over years, some begin to pull away. But since investors spend most of their time on early, stage C companies, most of their experience involves companies that appear roughly equally uncertain. The Power Law hides in plain sight. Outside Silicon Valley, venture capital seems peripheral. Less than 1% of new businesses receive venture funding. Total VC investment accounts for less than 0.2% of GDP. But venture-backed companies create 11% of all private sector jobs and generate revenue equivalent to 21% of GDP. The dozen largest tech companies were all venture-backed. Together they are worth more than $2 trillion, more than all other tech companies combined. What the Power Law means for individuals: the Power Law is not just important for investors, it is important for everyone, because everyone is an investor. Entrepreneurs invest their time and energy. Employees invest their careers. Students invest in their education. The standard advice is diversification. Don't put all your eggs in one basket. But this advice only makes sense if returns are roughly normally distributed. If they follow a Power Law, diversification is exactly wrong. The most valuable career move is to join the very best company while it's growing fast. Owning 0.01% of Google is worth more than 100% of most other ventures. For startups, this has a concrete implication. One market will likely be much better than all others. One distribution strategy will dominate. Some moments matter vastly more than others. The Power Law means it is worth thinking very carefully about where your actions will fall on the curve. Key ideas: right pointing arrow. Venture returns follow a Power Law. A single best investment often outperforms all others combined. Right pointing arrow: only invest in companies capable of returning the entire fund's value. This eliminates most options. Right pointing arrow: the Power Law hides because early stage companies look similar. Differences only become dramatic over time. Right pointing arrow: venture-backed companies create 21% of US GDP despite receiving just 0.2% of investment. Power Law in action. Right pointing arrow: everyone is an investor. Career choices, startup decisions, and time allocation all follow the Power Law. Chapter 8: Secrets. What isn't being told? Every great company is built around a secret, something important and true that almost nobody else believes or has noticed. If there were no secrets left in the world, there would be no great companies left to build. The health of innovation in any society depends on whether people still believe that secrets can be found. Secrets versus mysteries. There is a crucial distinction between a mystery and a secret. A mystery is something that cannot be understood, it exceeds human comprehension. String theory may be a mystery. A secret is something that can be known but has not yet been found, something hard but achievable. The difference matters enormously. You can pursue secrets but not mysteries. The contrarian question, what important truth do very few people agree with you on? Is asking, what is your secret? What do you see that others have missed? The business version is, what valuable company is nobody building? Every correct answer to this question is a secret. Something important and unknown, something hard but doable. Why people stop looking for secrets? Modern society has gradually lost faith in the existence of secrets. 4 social trends have collaborated to produce this loss of faith. 1. Incrementalism. From the earliest years of schooling, we are taught to proceed one small step at a time. Academic progress is measured in small, standardized units. Overachieving, learning something beyond what is on the test, earns no reward. The incentive structure pushes toward doing exactly what is expected, a little better than peers. 2. Risk aversion secrets, by definition, are ideas that have not been vetted by the mainstream. Pursuing them means being lonely and possibly wrong. The prospect of dedicating years to a belief that no one else holds, and being proved mistaken, is genuinely frightening. Most ambitious people choose safer paths rather than risk ridicule. 3. Complacency social elites, those with the most freedom to explore, believe in secrets the least. Why search for something new when you can collect rent on what already exists? The message at top law and business schools is implicit. You've made it. Your worries are over. Complacency masquerades as wisdom. 4. Flatness globalization creates the impression that the world is one homogeneous competitive marketplace. Anyone considering the search for new truths first asks, if this were discoverable, wouldn't someone smarter have found it already? This voice of doubt, amplified by the assumption of a global talent pool, discourages the search before it begins. The Unabomber's insight and failure, Ted Kaczynski believed that all hard problems had been solved, leaving only easy and impossible ones. His conclusion was to destroy civilization and start over. His diagnosis was understandable, his prescription was catastrophic. The correct response to the apparent absence of secrets is to look harder, not to give up. 2 types of secrets: secrets of nature, secrets about people, hidden aspects of the physical world, things people don't know about themselves, found through scientific investigation, found by asking what cannot be said publicly. Physics, chemistry, biology, sociology, psychology, taboo topics. What is nature not telling you? What are people not telling you? Example: pharmaceutical secrets. Example: the monopoly, competition, insight. Natural secrets get more attention, but human secrets are relatively underappreciated. The best secrets often arise from asking, what are people not allowed to talk about? What is forbidden or taboo? These are often the most revealing questions of all. Finding secrets. Where to look? The best place to look for secrets is where no one else is looking. Most people think only in terms of what they have been taught in standardized curricula. Fields that matter but have not been standardized and institutionalized are particularly promising. Thiel's example is nutrition. It affects everyone, yet no one can major in it at Harvard. Most of the big studies were conducted 30 to 40 years ago, and most are seriously flawed. There is plenty more to discover. Secrets and great companies. Every great business is built around a secret hidden from the outside. Airbnb saw untapped supply, people with unused rooms, and unaddressed demand, travelers wanting alternatives to hotels. Where others saw nothing, Uber saw an opportunity hidden in plain sight. Connecting drivers with passengers at a scale and convenience the taxi industry could not match. The reason these companies were so consistently underestimated, their ideas seem obvious in retrospect, is itself an argument for secrets. If insights that look so elementary after the fact can support billion-dollar businesses, there must remain many great companies still to start. The frontier has not closed. The map has not been completed. What looks obvious today was invisible 5 years ago. Who to tell? Once you find a secret, you face a choice. Tell no one or tell everyone. The correct answer lies between these extremes. Tell whoever you need to, and no more. In practice, the right vessel for sharing a secret is a company. A company is a conspiracy to see the world. When you share your secret with a co-founder or early employee, they become a fellow conspirator. The small, tightly knit group creates the conditions for acting on what the outside world has not yet seen. Key ideas: right pointing arrow. Every great business is built on a secret, something important and true that almost no one else sees. Right pointing arrow. 4 forces suppress the search for secrets: incrementalism, risk aversion, complacency, and flatness. Right pointing arrow. Secrets are distinct from mysteries. They are hard but achievable, not impossible. Right pointing arrow. 2 types of secrets: secrets of nature, physical world, and secrets about people, taboo knowledge. Right pointing arrow. Look for secrets in fields that matter but haven't been institutionalized. Right pointing arrow. A company is the right vessel for sharing and acting on secrets. Chapter 9: Foundations. Getting the start right. Thiel's law: a startup messed up at its foundation cannot be fixed. Beginnings have a disproportionate and largely irreversible impact on everything that follows. A company is not just an organization, it is a set of commitments, relationships, and habits established at the outset that constrain or enable all future possibilities. The primacy of beginnings: the universe itself was defined by its earliest moments, In the first microseconds of existence, the laws of physics were different from those we know today. The United States was defined by the debates of the Constitutional Convention in 1787. Those foundational decisions, about representation, about the structure of government, about the relationship between states and the federal government, have proved extraordinarily durable and largely irreversible. Companies are like countries in this way. Bad decisions made early, the wrong partners, the wrong people, misaligned incentives, are very hard to correct. It may take a crisis approaching bankruptcy before anyone will even try. As a founder, getting the foundation right is not just one priority among many, it is the precondition for everything else. Choosing co-founders choosing a co-founder is more like a marriage than a hiring decision. The optimism that pervades all new relationships means the decision is almost always made without thinking soberly about what could go wrong. But if co-founders develop irreconcilable differences, the company becomes the victim. Thiel invested in a company where two people had met at a networking event and decided to start a business together. One was a brilliant, eccentric thinker. The other was an MBA type who saw the opportunity primarily as a gold rush. The company failed rely because of co-founder mismatch. Founders should share a prehistory before starting a company together, otherwise they are rolling dice. Ownership, possession, and control, three distinct concepts, must be distinguished and managed carefully in any company. Concept definition and typical holder ownership: who legally owns the company's equity, founders, employees, investors. Possession: who actually runs the company day to day, founders and managers. Control: who formally governs the company's affairs, board of directors, founders plus investors. In theory these functions work smoothly. Equity attracts and rewards investors and workers. Possession motivates founders. Oversight keeps managers accountable. In practice, distributing these functions among different people multiplies opportunities for misalignment. The DMV illustrates the extreme case. Citizens nominally own it. Bureaucrats possess it. Politicians control it. In practice, none of these relationships functions as intended, and the DMV serves no one well. Startups must actively manage the misalignment risks between their founders, investors, and early employees. Board design: the board is the primary mechanism through which ownership and control interact. Key principle: the smaller the board, the better. A board of 3 is ideal. Never exceed 5 for an early stage company. A large board provides cover for inaction. It exercises no effective oversight while appearing to. A small board enables genuine communication, consensus, and accountability. Every single board member matters. Even one problem director can jeopardize a company's future. Choose board members as carefully as co-founders. On the bus or off the bus, everyone involved with a company should be fully involved, full time, in the same place. Anyone who doesn't own stock options or draw a regular salary is fundamentally misaligned. At the margin, they will claim value in the near term rather than create it in the future. This is why consultants don't work for startups, why part-time employees don't work, and why remote working should be minimized. The decision about whether to involve someone is binary. Either they are on the bus or they are off it. Ambiguity in this dimension is a recipe for misalignment. Cash compensation and equity: Thiel's principle. A company does better the less its CEO is paid. For early-stage venture-backed startups, a CEO's salary above $150,000 per year is a warning sign. High cash compensation incentivizes the CEO to protect the status quo and their salary rather than to work with everyone else to surface and fix problems. A cash-poor CEO focuses on building the company's total value. Aaron Levy, CEO of Box, paid himself less than everyone else in the company for 4 years after founding it, living in a one-bedroom apartment with a mattress as the only furniture. Every employee noticed and emulated this commitment. Equity is more powerful than cash precisely because it is illiquid and tied to one specific company. Anyone who prefers equity to cash reveals a preference for the long-term and genuine commitment to the company's future. Equity creates alignment where cash creates extraction. Key ideas: right pointing arrow. Thiel's law. A startup messed up at its foundation cannot be fixed. Right pointing arrow: choose co-founders as carefully as a life partner. Shared prehistory and genuine compatibility matter enormously. Right pointing arrow: distinguish ownership, equity, possession, operations, and control, governance, and manage the gaps between them. Right pointing arrow: ideal board size is 3, never exceed 5. A large board is a cover for dysfunction, not a sign of good governance. Right pointing arrow. Everyone involved with the company should be fully involved. Full, time and co-located. Right pointing arrow. Low CEO cash compensation and equity based incentives align everyone around building long-term value. Chapter 10. The mechanics of mafia. Building culture. Company culture doesn't exist apart from the company itself. There is no culture separate from the people and their mission. A startup is a team of people on a mission, and culture is simply what that looks like from the inside. The most important cultural work happens before anyone is hired. The PayPal mafia. Of the 6 people who started PayPal, 4 had built bombs in high school. 5 were 23 or younger. 4 had been born outside the United States. 3 had escaped from communist countries. By any conventional measure, they were eccentric. They became known in Silicon Valley as the PayPal Mafia, not because of any formal organization but because of the extraordinary network of companies they subsequently built. After selling PayPal to eBay for $1.5 billion in 2002, Elon Musk founded SpaceX and Co., founded Tesla, Reid Hoffman Co., founded LinkedIn, Steve Chen, Chad Hurley, and Jawed Karim founded YouTube. Jeremy Stoppelman and Russell Simmons founded Yelp. David Sachs Co., founded Yammer. Thiel Co., founded Palantir. All 7 companies are now worth more than $1 billion each. The PayPal office had no remarkable amenities. The culture was strong not because of perks but because of genuine shared mission, shared values, and people who actually wanted to work together. Why culture matters more than perks. The ideal company culture as imagined by conventional wisdom includes beanbag chairs, ping-pong tables, free massages, on-site sushi chefs, yoga classes, pets welcome. Thiel's response: without genuine substance, perks don't work. You cannot build a great culture by hiring an interior decorator, a human resources consultant, or a branding specialist. At a law firm, talented individuals work together all day but have little to say to each other outside the office. This is the purely professional view of work, free agents who check in and out on a transactional basis. It is not rational even in financial terms. If you can't count durable relationships among the outputs of your time at work, you haven't invested it well. Recruiting as a core competency. Recruiting should never be outsourced. It is one of the most important things a founder does. The question that matters most is not, is this person talented? But, why would this talented person join us specifically? Generic answers don't work. Your stock will be worth more here. You'll work with the smartest people. You'll solve the world's most challenging problems. Every company makes these claims. They are indistinguishable and therefore useless. Good answers are specific to your company, and they fall into 2 categories. Answers about mission: why is what you're doing important and unique? And answers about team: why is this part? Particular group of people the right match for this particular person? Similarity and the startup uniform. Max Levchin's principle. Startups should make their early staff as personally similar as possible. This sounds counterintuitive in an era of diversity initiatives, but the reasoning is practical. Startups with limited resources must work quickly and efficiently. This is easier when everyone shares fundamental assumptions about the world. The early PayPal team were all the same kind of nerd. They loved science fiction. Cryptonomicon was required reading. They preferred the capitalist Star Wars to what they saw as the collectivist Star Trek. Most importantly, they were all obsessed with Crescent ATING, a digital currency controlled by individuals rather than governments. From the outside, everyone in a great company should be different in the same way, a tribe of like-minded people devoted to the company's mission. The startup uniform, branded T-shirt or hoodie, is not vanity, it is a signal of shared identity. Do one thing on the inside: every individual should be sharply distinguished by their unique function. The best thing Thiel did as a manager at PayPal was to make every person responsible for exactly one thing. Each employee's one thing was unique. They were evaluated on it and nothing else. This practice eliminated a hidden source of conflict. Most fights inside a company happen when colleagues compete for the same responsibilities. Defining clear, non-overlapping roles makes this competition impossible. Internal peace is what enables a startup to survive. Factional strife makes it vulnerable to outside threats like an autoimmune disease makes an organism vulnerable to infections. Cult or consultant. The best startups resemble cults in their intensity of shared purpose, but there is a crucial difference. Cults are fanatically wrong about something important. People at a successful startup are fanatically right about something that outsiders have misad. They are not cutting themselves off from reality, they are pursuing a truth that reality will eventually validate. The culture spectrum runs from consulting firms at one extreme, no distinctive mission, people constantly entering and leaving, no long-term connection, to cults at the other, total devotion, isolation from the outside world. The best startups occupy a point closer to the cult end, but with the external orientation that cults lack. Key ideas: right pointing arrow culture is not separate from the company, it is the company as experienced from the inside. Right pointing arrow recruiting is a core competency that should never be outsourced. Right pointing arrow gives specific answers about mission and team, not generic claims about opportunity. Right pointing arrow early teams should be personally similar, shared worldview enables speed and coherence. Right pointing arrow every individual should own exactly one thing, distinct roles eliminate the competition that destroys teams. Right pointing arrow great startups are fanatically right about something outsiders have missed. Cults are fanatically wrong. Chapter 11 If you build it, will they come? The importance of sales. The Silicon Valley bias against sales is deep and widespread. Engineers are skeptical of anything that involves persuasion rather than technical correctness. But this bias is costly. Poor sales is the most common cause of startup failure, and the field TAT engineers most dismiss is one of the most consequential. Why nerds hate sales. Engineering disciplines produce work that can be evaluated by technical criteria alone. A program either works or it fails. The output is visible, testable, and objectively accessible. Sales is the opposite. Its goal is to change surface appearances without changing underlying reality, to persuade, influence, and frame. To an engineer, this looks like manipulation at best and deception at worst. But advertising exists because it works, including on engineers, who tell themselves they are immune. The best salespeople are not obvious, their art is hidden. Tom Sawyer persuaded his friends to pay him for the privilege of whitewashing his fence. The grandmasters of sales are invisible. Most people with sales jobs have titles that mention nothing about selling: account executive, business development, investment banker, politician. Distribution. A spectrum of methods. The right distribution method depends on the size of the average sale, the complexity of the customer relationship, and the structure of the market. No single method works universally. A startup must find the one that actually works for its product and market. Complex sales, $1 million plus, at very high price points. Every deal requires close personal attention over months or years. SpaceX used this approach to win billion-dollar NASA contracts for replacing the space shuttle. Palantir uses it for data analytics deals ranging from $1 million to $100 million. At this level, customers want to talk to the CEO, not the VP of sales. Complex sales requires patience. Good enterprise strategy starts small, builds reference customers, and works methodically toward larger deals. Personal sales, $10,000 minus $100K. The challenge is not closing any single deal but establishing a repeatable process to move product to a wide audience. Box's growth from Stanford Sleep Clinic to university. Wide contract illustrates the method. Build relationships with individual users, demonstrate value in each organization, expand from there. Never try to sell the entire university at once. The distribution dead zone, $1,000 minus $10K. Products priced in this range often have no viable distribution channel. Too expensive to sell through mass advertising, too cheap to justify a dedicated sales force. Many good B2B software tools fail not because the product is bad but because no one can figure out how to reach the buyers efficiently. Distribution is the hidden bottleneck. Marketing and advertising, mass market products. Marketing works when customer acquisition cost and customer lifetime value make every other distribution channel uneconomical. Warby Parker's direct to consumer eyeglasses, $100 per pair, could not justify personal sales on each transaction. They used advertising to reach millions efficiently. The key is arithmetic. Only when CLV exceeds CAC can advertising be sustained. Viral marketing, network products. Products are viral when using them naturally encourages users to invite others. Every PayPal payment invited the recipient into the network. Every Facebook message made non-users visible by their absence. The ideal viral loop is quick and frictionless, shorter the cycle time, the faster the exponential growth. PayPal's paid viral strategy, paying users $10 to join, $10 more for each referral, achieved 7% daily user growth, nearly doubling the user base every 10 days. At 7% daily growth, a user base roughly doubles every 10 days. The cost of $20 per customer acquisition was paid back many times over. The power law of distribution. Distribution follows its own power law. One method is likely to be far more powerful than every other for any given business. The kitchen sink approach, a few salespeople plus some advertising plus viral features bolted on, typically means no channel war chaos. Most businesses get 0 distribution channels working. Getting one channel to work is sufficient for a great business. Trying several and nailing none is fatal. Selling your company, not just your product. Every company must also sell itself, to employees and to investors. The instinct to ignore the press, especially among engineers, is a mistake. People who are considering joining will search for you. What they find shapes their decision. Investors who are considering funding you will ask what others say about you. Public relations is not vanity, it is sales applied to a different audience. The lesson generalizes: everybody has a product to sell. If you're a founder, you're selling the company. If you're an employee, you're selling your capabilities. If you're an investor, you're selling capital. If you don't see any salespeople in your company, you are the salesperson. Key ideas. Right pointing arrow. Poor sales, not bad product, is the most common cause of startup failure. Right pointing arrow. Sales is hidden. The best salespeople don't look like salespeople. Right pointing arrow. Distribution methods span a spectrum: complex sales, personal sales, dead zone, marketing, viral. Right pointing arrow. Distribution follows its own power law. Find the one method that works, and go all in on it. Right pointing arrow. You must sell more than your product. Sell to employees, investors, and the media too. Right pointing arrow. Everyone in every company is in sales. If you don't see salespeople around you, you are one. Chapter 12: Man and Machine, Humans and Computers as Complements. The most common anxiety about technology is that computers will replace human workers. This fear is understandable but misguided. Computers are not substitutes for people, they are complements. The most valuable businesses of coming decades will be built by entrepreneurs who empower humans rather than try to make them obsolete. Globalization versus automation. A critical distinction: Americans fear automation for the same reasons they feared globalization, because they perceive it as a competitive threat. But the two situations are fundamentally different. When Mexican workers compete with American workers, the competition is between people who need food, shelter, and consumer goods. Their interests directly conflict over limited resources. When computers compete with human workers, there is no conflict over resources. Computers don't want salaries, food, or housing. They require only electricity, which they are not even capable of wanting. This is the critical asymmetry. Men and machines co-compete for neither jobs nor resources in the way that men and men do. Complementarity. Why humans and computers are different. People and computers excel at fundamentally different kinds of tasks. This difference is so large that the gains from human-computer collaboration far exceed the gains from any human-human trade. Humans excelling, computers excelling, forming plans and making decisions in complex situations, processing enormous quantities of data quickly and accurately, applying contextual judgment and common sense, performing repetitive, rule-based operations without error, understanding social context and intention, identifying patterns in large datasets, making basic identifications in novel situations, running calculations at superhuman speed, combining insights from different domains, executing well-defined algorithms perfectly. The scale of this difference is illustrated by Google's 2012 experiment. A supercomputer with 16,000 CPUs scanned 10 million YouTube thumbnails and learned to identify cats with 75% accuracy after many hours of processing. Any 4-year-old can do this flawlessly in milliseconds. Humans and computers are not simply more or less powerful than each other, they are categorically different. PayPal's hybrid solution. In mid-2000, PayPal was losing $10 million per month to credit card fraud. Processing hundreds of transactions per minute made human review impossible. Automated software detection worked initially but quickly failed. Fraudsters adapted their tactics hour by hour. Software couldn't adapt fast enough to an adversary who changed their behavior daily. The solution was hybrid. Software flagged the most suspicious transactions on a carefully designed user interface. Human operators made the final judgment on each flagged case. The system, named Igor after a Russian fraudster who had boasted that PayPal could never stop him, turned PayPal's first quarterly profit in Q1 2002, compared to a loss of $29.3 million the previous year. Igor became the basis for Palantir, which Thiel founded in 2004 on the same principle. Palantir, The human computer model at scale. Palanta builds software that helps analysts extract insight from divergent sources of information. It serves law enforcement, intelligence agencies, financial institutions, and health authorities. Its tools have been used to predict IED placement in Afghanistan, prosecute insider trading, take down child exploitation networks, trace foodborne disease outbreaks, and detect financial fraud. In every case, the software does what computers do best, finding patterns in huge datasets and flagging anomalies, while human analysts do what humans do best, interpreting context, assessing intent, and making judgment calls. Neither the computer alone nor the human alone could achieve what the combination achieves. The bias towards substitution in computer science. Why do so many technologists miss the power of complementarity? The answer lies in how computer science is taught and practiced. Academics make reputations through specialized research, reducing human capabilities to define tasks that computers can be and to perform one by one. Machine learning evokes replacement. Big data implies that more data always creates more value, but big data is usually dumb data without human interpretation. LinkedIn's model stands as the complementary counter. Example: LinkedIn did not try to replace recruiters with software. Recruiting requires detective work, social assessment, and persuasion, tasks that computers cannot combine effectively. Instead, LinkedIn transformed how recruiters do their jobs. Today, more than 97% of recruiters use LinkedIn to source candidates. By empowering human recruiters rather than replacing them, LinkedIn created enormous value for both recruiters and the hundreds of millions of professionals on the platform. Key ideas: right-pointing arrow. Computers are complements for humans, not substitutes. They excel at fundamentally different tasks. Right-pointing arrow. The competition between humans and computers differs crucially from competition between humans. Computers don't compete for resources. Right-pointing arrow. The most valuable businesses combine human judgment with computational power, as demonstrated by PayPal's fraud detection and Palanta's intelligence software. Right-pointing arrow. Machine learning and big data are tools for augmenting human capability, not replacing it. Right-pointing arrow. LinkedIn succeeded by empowering recruiters. Had it tried to replace them, it would have had no business. Chapter 13: Seeing Green, the clean tech lesson. At the start of the 21st century, clean energy seemed like the obvious next frontier. Entrepreneurs started thousands of clean tech companies. Investors poured more than $50 billion into them. The result was a massive bubble that destroyed most of the capital invested. Understanding why cleantech failed is essential for any entrepreneur in any sector trying to build a genuinely valuable business. 7 questions every business must answer. Thiel diagnoses cleantech's failure through 7 questions that every business must answer. Most cleantech companies could not answer even one of them satisfactorily. Any one unanswered question is sufficient to doom a company. Answering all 7 gives it a genuine chance. Question cleantech failure 1. Engineering. Can you create breakthrough technology instead of incremental improvements? Solindra's cylindrical cells were only 1 pi as efficient as flat ones, inferior from the start. 2. Timing. Is now the right time to start your particular business? Solar PV efficiency improved slowly and linearly since 1954, unlike Moore's law for processes. 3. Monopoly. Are you starting with a big share of a small market? Founders pitched trillion-dollar energy markets, the most competitive imaginable. 4. People. Do you have the right team? Most cleantech CEOs wore suits, a sign of salesmen masquerading as technologists. 5. Distribution. Do you have a way to deliver your product? Better Place raised $800 million and sold 1,000 cars. Distribution was impossibly complex. 6. Durability. Will your market position be defensible in 10 to 20 years? No one anticipated Chinese competition or the fracking revolution. 7. Secret. Have you identified a unique opportunity others don't see? All companies shared the same generic belief that green energy was needed. Tesla, the counter example. Tesla is one of the few cleantech companies to survive and thrive. The reason is that it answered all 7 questions correctly. Technology. Tesla's integrated engineering, battery packs, powertrain, software, design, achieved genuine 10x improvements. Consumer Reports gave the Model S the highest rating of any car ever reviewed. Timing. Elon Musk recognized a one-time window for government subsidies in 2009-2010. He secured a $465 million Department of Energy loan in January 2010, a window that was impossibly narrow before and impossibly narrow after. Monopoly. Tesla started with the tiny market for high end electric sports cars, $109,000 roadsters, dominating a niche completely before expanding to the Model S and beyond. People, Musk assembled a team described as special forces, elite engineers and salespeople who chose intensity. Distribution. Tesla owned the entire distribution chain, no dealer network. Higher upfront cost, complete control over the customer experience. Durability. Strong brand in a category where trust takes years to build. Founder still in charge. Secret. Tesla understood that cleantech was as much a social phenomenon as an environmental one. Rich customers wanted to look cool, not just green. Tesla made cars people genuinely desired. The myth of social entrepreneurship. The cleantech bubble was the biggest event in the history of social entrepreneurship, and its biggest failure. Social entrepreneurs aim to do well by doing good, combining corporate power with non-profit purpose. But the ambiguity between financial and social goals typically means achieving neither. The deeper problem is that social entrepreneurship tends to produce companies as undifferentiated as the goals they pursue. Hundreds of companies all aimed at the same broadly defined good, clean energy, without any specific secret, any specific market, or any specific technological edge. Doing something genuinely different is what is truly good for society, because it is also the only way to build a durable business. The Energy 2.0 opportunity. The macro need for new energy solutions remains real and urgent. The lesson of cleantech is not that energy startups are doomed, it is that every successful energy startup must think small. Find a specific niche, powering remote islands with solar, build ENG modular nuclear reactors for military installations, and dominate it before expanding. Key ideas. Right pointing arrow. 7 questions every business must answer. Engineering, timing, monopoly, people, distribution, durability, secret. Right pointing arrow. Most cleantech companies could answer 0 of the 7, they relied on macro necessity, not specific advantage. Right pointing arrow. Tesla succeeded by answering all 7 correctly, starting with a dominate, able niche and expanding from there. Right pointing arrow. Social entrepreneurship fails when social good substitutes for specific business thinking. Right pointing arrow. The opportunity in energy, and any other urgent sector, requires the same discipline as any startup, niche first. Chapter 14. The Founder's Paradox. Founders of great companies tend to be extreme and contradictory figures, simultaneously insiders and outsiders, celebrated and despised, powerful and vulnerable. This is not coincidental. The paradox is structural, and understanding it matters for how founders lead and how they think about their role. The PayPal founders. Of the 6 PayPal founders, 4 had built bombs in high school, 5 were 23 or younger, 4 were born outside the United States, 3 had escaped communist countries. Luke Nosek was already signed up for cryonics, to be frozen at death in hope of future revival. Max Levchin had been in diplomatic limbo when the USSR collapsed mid-escape. Russ Simmons had escaped from a trailer park to the top maths and science school in Illinois. Were these people extreme by nature, or did they simply end up appearing extreme through the distortions of memory and reputation? Both forces are at work. Founders tend to have genuinely unusual traits, and then the world amplifies those traits further as their success attracts attention. The distribution of founder traits. Most people cluster in the middle of a normal distribution on any given trait. Founders tend to appear at both extremes simultaneously, not just one end but both ends at once. They are rich on paper and cash, poor. They oscillate between sullen jerkiness and remarkable charisma. They are simultaneously insiders of their own companies, their own circles, and outsiders, to the mainstream, to conventional careers. This inverse, normal distribution is not fully explained by inherent traits alone. The cycle reinforces itself. Unusual people attract attention. Attention amplifies their apparent unusualness. They begin to perform the extreme identity that others expect of them. The performance makes them more extreme in reality. Richard Branson, Sean Parker, and the founder archetype. Richard Branson, founder of the Virgin Group, embodies the archetype, genuinely entrepreneurial from age 16, but also an expert cultivator of his own extreme persona, the lion's mane hair, the kiteboarding with supermodels, the insistence that he was born this way. Whether natural or constructed, the brand of extreme individuality becomes indistinguishable from the reality. Sean Parker, Napster, Facebook's first president, illustrates the outsider, to insider, to outsider cycle. Arrested by the FBI at 16, County founded a company that amassed 10 million users in his first year before being shut down by court order, then became the coolest person in Silicon Valley after Justin Timberlake's portrayal of him in The Social Network. Celebrity and infamy are not opposites, they are two faces of the same extreme public position. The scapegoat structure. The mythological roots of the founder paradox lie in the ancient institution of the scapegoat. Primitive societies faced the constant threat of internal conflict. When disasters, plagues, or rivalries threatened the community, they placed all blame on a single person. A scapegoat who could resolve the community's tension by absorbing its violence. Scapegoats were extreme figures who combined powerlessness. They could not prevent their own sacrifice. With extraordinary power, they could resolve social conflict through that sacrifice. Before execution, they were often worshipped like deities. The Fouinders of cities, Romulus and Remus, Oedipus, are all versions of this archetype: insider, outsiders, lawmakers and law breakers, simultaneously powerful and condemned. Modern celebrities follow the same pattern. We elevate them to extraordinary status and then wait, with barely concealed eagerness, for their fall. Elvis, Michael Jackson, Britney Spears, each was elevated to royalty and then consumed by the culture that created them. Technology founders receive the same treatment. Bill Gates and Steve Jobs. Bill Gates embodied the founder paradox. Simultaneously the world's most powerful individual and, in the eyes of the US Department of Justice, a dangerous monopolist who needed to be broken up. His prosecution consumed years that could have been spent building new technology. After stepping down as Microsoft CEO in 2000, he entered an era of philanthropy, but Microsoft entered an era of relative stagnation. Steve Jobs' return to Apple demonstrated the irreplaceable value of a founder. In 1997, Apple was nearly bankrupt. Michael Dell publicly suggested Apple should be shut down and its money returned to shareholders. Jobs returned and introduced the iPod, 2001, the iPhone, 2007, and the iPad, 2010. By 2012, Apple was the most valuable company in the world. This was not the product of professional management, it was the product of a singular vision that no hired executive could replicate. What founders must understand: the lesson for founders. Individual prominence and adulation can be exchanged for individual notoriety and demonization at any moment. Be careful, the crowd that worships you today will be waiting for you to fail. Do not overestimate your own power as an individual. Founders are important not because they are the only ones whose work has value, but because a great founder can draw out the best work from everyone else at the company. The founder's role is to create conditions in which others can do extraordinary work. Do not become so certain of your own myth that you lose your mind, the most dangerous trap for successful founders. But equally, do not mistake disenchantment for wisdom. The purpose of a company requires belief in something larger than professional competence. The greatest danger for any business is to lose all sense of mission. Key ideas: right-pointing arrow founders tend to display extreme and contradictory traits, both poles simultaneously rather than the normal distribution. Right-pointing arrow. The founder paradox is structural. The cycle of unusual traits: right-pointing arrow amplified attention, right-pointing arrow performed extremity, right-pointing arrow actual extremity reinforces itself. Right-pointing arrow founders are modern versions of ancient scapegoats, simultaneously powerful and vulnerable, worshipped and condemned. Right-pointing arrow. Bill Gates' downfall showed the cost of attacking founders. Jobs' return showed their irreplaceable value. Right-pointing arrow founders are important not because they alone have value but because they can draw out the best in everyone else. Right-pointing arrow. The greatest danger is to lose your mind in your own myth, or to lose your mission to disenchanted professionalism. Chapter conclusion: stagnation or singularity. Thiel closes with a stark choice about the long-term future. Philosopher Nick Bostrom has described 4 possible patterns for civilization's trajectory, and Thiel uses this framework to argue that the choice between catastrophe and breakthrough is not determined by history. It is made by people who decide to act. 4 possible futures. The 4 trajectories are: 1. Recurrent collapse, prosperity and ruin alternating endlessly, as the ancients assumed. 2. Plateau, gradual convergence toward a stable level of development similar to today's richest countries. 3. Extinction, a collapse so devastating that humanity does not survive. 4. Takeoff, accelerating progress toward a dramatically different and better future. Thiel's assessment: recurrent collapse seems unlikely because knowledge is too widely distributed for a period of darkness to precede recovery. Extinction would be more likely than dark age, then recovery. The plateau scenario, global convergence, might be achievable, but would it be stable? When every person and firm on Earth competes for the same limited resources, competition intensifies rather than moderates. Without new technology to relieve competitive pressure, stagnation tends toward conflict. That leaves the fourth scenario, creating new technology to make a much better future. The most dramatic version of this is the singularity, superhuman artificial intelligence, exponential technological growth beyond current comprehension. Ray Kurzweil argues this is inevitable. Thiel is skeptical. The future will not happen on its own, no matter how many exponential trends can be traced. The choice that lies ahead, the stark choice, is between nothing, stagnation leading to conflict and possible extinction, and something, technology creating a better future. Whether or not the singularity is real or near is less important than this simpler framing. We cannot take for granted that the future will be better. We must work to make it so. Our task today is to find singular ways to create the new things that will make the future not just different, but better, to go from 0 to 1. The essential first step is to think for yourself. Only by seeing our world anew, as fresh and strange as it was to the ancients who saw it first, can we both create it and preserve it for the future. Peter Thiel. Key ideas: right pointing arrow, the four possible futures: recurrent collapse, global plateau, extinction, or technological takeoff. Right pointing arrow, the plateau is unstable without new technology. Resource competition drives stagnation toward conflict. Right pointing arrow, the singularity may or may not be real or near, but that question is less important than the basic choice: act or don't. Right pointing arrow, we cannot assume the future will be better. We must make it so through deliberate creation. Right pointing arrow, the essential first step is to think for yourself, to see the world freshly. Chapter Master Framework: 7 questions every business must answer. The Cleantech chapter crystallizes the book's analytical framework into 7 questions that every entrepreneur must be able to answer before building a company. These questions operationalize all of the book's major themes. A business that answers all 7 has a genuine chance. Missing even one is usually fatal. Question: what to ask. Link to book's core ideas. Engineering: can you create breakthrough technology, not incremental improvement? Chapters 3 and 5. Proprietary technology must be 10x better. Anything less is indistinguishable from background noise. Timing is now the right time for your specific business. Chapter 6. Definite planning requires accurate assessment of when conditions enable a business that was impossible before. Monopoly: are you starting with a big share of a small, specific market? Chapters 3 and 5. Start small and dominate, then scale. A big initial market is a red flag, not a green one. People: do you have the right team? And do they know why they're together? Chapters 9 and 10. Foundations and culture. Co-founder compatibility, shared worldview, specific mission. Distribution: do you have a way not just to create but to deliver your product? Chapter 11. Distribution is not secondary. It follows its own power law. One channel must work. Durability: will your market position be defensible in 10 to 20 years? Chapter 5. Last mover advantage requires planning for the endgame from the beginning. Secret: have you identified a unique opportunity others don't see? Chapter 8. Every great company is built on a secret. Generic opportunities create undifferentiated competition. The book's master arguments, summarized 0 to 1, makes a set of interconnected claims that together constitute a coherent philosophy of innovation and value creation. Progress comes in 2 forms: horizontal, copying, and vertical, creating. Technology, 0 to 1 creation, is more powerful and more urgent than globalization. The 4post.com dogmas: incremental advances, leanness without planning, competitive improvement, product over sales, are wrong. The opposite principles are more correct. Monopoly, not competition, is the engine of progress. Competitive markets destroy profits and prevent long-term planning. Creative monopolies create and share abundance. Competition is an ideology that distorts thinking. Most business conflict is Shakespearean: we fight because we are similar, rather than Marxist, because we are different. Durable monopolies are built on proprietary technology, 10x better, network effects, economies of scale, and branding, starting from a small dominated niche. The 4 attitudes toward the future: indefinite pessimism, definite pessimism, definite optimism, indefinite optimism, explain much of what is dysfunctional about modern economies. The US needs to recover definite optimism. The power law governs venture capital and every career choice. Focus on things that can be 10x, not on diversification across many small bets. Secrets still exist, in nature and about people. Every great company is built on 1. The forces that suppress the search for secrets, incrementalism, risk aversion, complacency, flatness, are powerful but resistible. Foundations matter enormously and are largely irreversible. Choose co-founders carefully. Design equity and compensation structures to align everyone. Keep boards small. Culture is not separate from the company. Hire people who share a genuine commitment to the mission. Assign each person exactly one unique thing, and treat the company as a tribe devoted to a specific secret. Sales is as important as product. Distribution follows its own power law. Find the one channel that works. Everybody in every company is in sales. Computers are complements to humans, not substitutes. The most valuable businesses will augment human capability rather than replace it. The 7 questions framework applies to every business: engineering, timing, monopoly, people, distribution, durability, secret. Founders are paradoxical, simultaneously insiders and outsiders, powerful and vulnerable. The greatest danger is to lose your mind in your own myth, or to lose your mission to professional disenchantment. The future is not predetermined. Stagnation or singularity, the choice is made by people who decide to act. To go from 0 to 1 is to work on building the future, not just inheriting it. Every time we create something new, we go from 0 to 1. The act of creation is singular, as is the moment of creation, and the result is something fresh and strange. Peter Thiel, 0 to 1.